Hello, everybody. And my group is going to be doing a presentation on deep sea fish and the adaptations that they have to live in the deep sea. So, first of all, what is the deep sea, or what qualifies as the deep sea? The deep sea technically begins at 656 feet below the surface, and generally it's light related. So at this depth, light that can penetrate through the water really drops off. But the deepest parts of the ocean can go even further down, all the way up to 35,876 feet deep at the deepest point, which is a trench in the Marianas Trench called the Challenger Deep. What kind of fish are found in the deep sea? Believe it or not, the deep sea actually has a lot of biodiversity, and these are just a few examples of the many different types of fish that can live in the deep sea. So you have the anglerfish, the viperfish, the bristlemouth fish, the grenadier's fish, fatfish, and cuskeel. And like I said, there's actually a lot of different, very unique animals that live in the deep sea. So what is an adaptation? Now, generally, an adaptation is going to refer to anything that helps an animal live, helps the plant or animal live in their environment. So this is going to be something that's beneficial to them, something that helps them more easily live in whatever environment that they live in. So how are these organisms adapted to living in the deep sea? In this presentation, we're going to focus on 4 adaptations that deep sea fish have in order to live in the deep sea. So these 4 adaptations are going to be bioluminescence, specialized eyes, adaptations for high pressure, and adaptations for lack of food.
Hi all, my name is Jacob. The first adaptation I want to talk about is bioluminescence. So bioluminescence is when a fish is able to create light in its body. Now, this light is used for a couple different functions. The first function I want to talk about is communication. And so when these fish are at the bottom of the ocean, there's little to no light coming down from above, they're able to use the light on their body to communicate with each other. One of the big things is members of a certain species being able to communicate with each other and find each other whenever it's time to mate. And so they'll use like a certain pattern on their body or something similar to be able to identify each other and mate. Another function is luring prey. Like on this anglerfish here, you can see that he has a little like arm bulb on the top of his head, and he will use this to attract in prey. Some anglerfish have a little bulb that's shaped like a worm, and that's one way how they will lure prey close enough so that they can take a bite out of them. And another function is going to be defense. So whenever a fish is swimming, some of them have lights on the belly of their body, and this helps them to counteract the silhouette that might be made from the light coming from above, if there's any coming from above. And so if you're a predator swimming below your prey and you look up, you won't be able to see their shadow, and so you can't attack them. Another way that fish will defend themselves is by using lights to find each other and communicate with each other. And they will school together. Or whenever a fish is swimming in a big group like a school, it's harder for a predator to pick out any one of them and eat any one of them. So they're able to communicate with each other and use this communication to defend themselves. So I want to see if you guys can guess which of these fish, each one of them may or may not be bioluminescent. So the first one on the left, I want you to pause the video, take a second, and guess whether or not it bioluminesces. So if you guessed yes, you'd be correct. You can see on the fish, they have that light under their eyes and that line that goes down their back that actually glow and allow the fish to communicate with each other and school together and find big groups. Now the fish in the middle, do you think that fish bioluminescence? If you said no, you'd be correct. That fish does not bioluminesce. It's just a plain old white fish that swims down at the bottom of the ocean. Now, the fish on the right, do you think that fish bioluminesces? If you said yes, you would also be correct. They have these awesome blue glowing cells all over the side of their body that allow them to glow. Now, the next adaptation I want to talk about is specialized eyes. So, fish at the bottom of the ocean need to be able to detect these very small amounts of light that are being given off by other fish, whether to detect predators or to detect members of their own species. And so they have a variety of different optical proteins in their eyes that allow them to detect a bunch of different shades of blue and green very well. The main colors that are used in bioluminescence are blue and green, so it's very important that they're able to see these colors and see them very well. Another thing is they have very large lenses. You can see that this fish on the top from the deep sea has a very big eye when compared to this regular goldfish on the bottom. The fish on the top has an eye that's almost as big as its head. And whereas the goldfish on the bottom has an eye that's kind of small compared to the rest of his body. And so they use this larger lens to be able to capture more light and see much easier down at the bottom of the ocean.
My name is Megan, and I'm going to be talking about the adaptation for high pressure. So, fish that live in high pressure environments need to be adapted. So, they have several different kinds of characteristics that can help adapt them and survive these really high pressures. So, first of all, fish don't have swim bladders. So, what are swim bladders? Swim bladders are air sacs that expand and shrink to allow for buoyancy so that the fish can control what level of water they want to go at. So, if they want to float, their swim bladder would expand, allowing for oxygen to come in or gases. And then whenever they want to sink, they would just expel the air. So it's much easier for them to be able to control their depth, and they don't got to actually swim to whichever level of depth of water they want to go to. They can just inflate and deflate their swim bladders. So for deep sea fish, they don't have swim bladders because of the high pressure. Because if they have swim bladders, so it's an air sac. So basically, when it's under the high pressure, it can pop. So that will help them to survive, basically, and to not die. So yeah, and I found it really interesting that that happens. And although there are some fish that do have swim bladders, if they're pulled out of the ocean really fast, like let's say somebody was on a boat and they were catching fish with like a net, if they pull them up too fast, their swim bladder, well, it inflates too much. So it basically overinflates and it can pop. So that's why they say whenever you take out the fish, like when they get fish that is like in a deeper level of water, they say not to release them back because they have trouble kind of like healing themselves. Like they can try to, but it usually doesn't work and they eventually will die. So that's why they say not to release them. So now I'm going to be talking about the adaptation for lack of food. So in the deep sea, there's a huge lack of food. So these creatures need to adapt to scarce food. So first of all, the size of fish does kind of matter because the smaller sized fish are better adapted to survive in that environment because they don't require as much food to eat. So they can live off of like small organisms and smaller meals. And they also have the ability to expand their stomachs. So let's say they can leave. So sometimes they have to travel a long distance to find food and they can eat a big meal. and then they can store it in their stomach for months and just use that if they can't find food. So also they eat detritus. So detritus is decaying remains. So let's say like fish or like an object dies, or like it was predation that failed. And like if the animal sinks to the bottom, they will just feed off of that. And I also saw somewhere that it said there was a species of whale that when it dies, it'll fall to the seafloor, and all the fishes and organisms will basically feed off of it, and they'll have like a big meal. And that's when it's good to store the food so that they can use later on. And then they also eat just decaying microorganisms, decaying algae that just is swept to the seafloor. So they also have long fang-like teeth, and this is really helpful because let's say they're trying to catch prey, and since they barely have any food, they obviously don't want to let the prey get away, and they want to catch it and make sure it doesn't escape. So that's really helpful for catching their food. Okay, so which fish live in the deep ocean? So we have all of these, and the one on the left side, you can see, which is an anglerfish, you can see that it has fangs, which can be really helpful to help catch its prey so that it doesn't escape. And these are the sources, and that concludes our presentation.